Welcome, friends, to a place where the sun is usually a promise, and the sand is the worst thing you track into the house. Welcome to Seabrook. It's the kind of sleepy, postcard-perfect beach town that tourist brochures call charming and locals call just fine. Thank you very much. For decades, the only real drama here was the annual argument over which local shop had the best clam chowder. Seabrook was boring. It was predictable. Until the tide brought in a secret, and the silent, Crimson Army decided to march. Now, let's be clear. This isn't the story you think it is. This isn't some schlocky, CGI-heavy creature feature where the crabs suddenly sprout wings and learn to hotwire a speedboat. No, this is a story about the quiet horror, the kind that creeps up on you while you're checking your phone, and by the time you look up, the world has irrevocably changed. The trouble began, as trouble often does, with something utterly mundane, a low tide. But not just any low tide. This was a lunar pull, so profound that it seemed to expose the very skeleton of the sea floor, receding miles past the usual breaker line. Old Man Hemlock, a relic of Seabrook whose own face looked like sun-dried driftwood, said he hadn't seen anything like it since '58. He also said the sea was holding its breath, which, in retrospect, was a disturbingly accurate meteorological observation. The first sign wasn't a sighting, it was a sound. A constant, dry rasping, like thousands of tiny fingernails tracing the same stretch of pavement. It started late one Tuesday night, after the last ice cream parlor had locked up and the town's single traffic light was dutifully blinking its redundant yellow warning. The town was suddenly blanketed by a noise that felt less like sound and more like a physical presence, a vast, organic sigh. Imagine pouring 5,000 bags of dried lentils onto a tin roof. Now, give those lentils legs and a mission. That was the sound, and as the townsfolk pressed their ears to their windows, squinting into the unnaturally moonlit darkness, the clicking grew louder. It wasn't the sound of an approaching storm. It was the sound of an approaching multitude. They were coming up from the beach, crossing the boardwalk, and spreading into the neat, manicured streets. Not hundreds, thousands, 5,000 red-shelled, beady-eyed, absolutely focused common shore crabs. And they were not here for the chowder. The arrival was terrifying precisely because it lacked any traditional menace. There was no roaring, no smashing, no grand, destructive entrance. Just relentless, quiet occupation. By dawn, Seabrook had become a town paved in purpose. The invaders had fanned out with frightening efficiency. Every drainpipe, every windowsill, every porch step was now a strategic foothold for the Crimson Horde. They moved with an unsettling purpose, ignoring food waste and human activity alike. They weren't scavenging. They were claiming. This was a coordinated effort that defied biological explanation, a flawless, unsettlingly polite siege. The true horror set in when people tried to leave. Mrs. Perkins, bless her heart, tried to back her sedan out of her driveway at 6:30 a.m. to get her usual pre-work latte. She paused, noticing the unusual bumpy texture of her concrete. When she finally opened her garage, she didn't see an exit. She saw a wall. The crabs had piled themselves up in an organized shoulder-to-shoulder formation, forming a living, twitching barricade across the entire street. It was as if they had read Sun Tzu's The Art of War and decided that total, nonviolent obstruction was the superior tactic. Her tires wouldn't touch the pavement. They would only crush 5,000 tiny opponents. And even the toughest Seabrook resident shied away from becoming a vehicular mass murderer. The subtle humor, the dark wit, of the situation was this. The crabs weren't attacking people. They were simply blocking them. They transformed Seabrook from a free-flowing town into a meticulous red-shelled prison. And the bars were 5,000 pairs of pincers held firmly against the ground. Sheriff Brody, a man whose biggest crisis management achievement was finding a lost golden retriever named Sparky, finally put the situation into chilling perspective. Standing on the steps of the town hall, completely surrounded, his boots resting inches from the nearest crab cluster, he addressed the handful of stunned citizens who had managed to gather. They haven't hurt anyone, he whispered, wiping sweat from his brow, but they've shut down the electric grid. The substation is covered, and they've somehow managed to short out the main junction box. We have no phones, we have no power, and judging by the fact that the entire main highway is now a giant, crunchy roadblock, we also have no escape. The crabs were patient. They were silent. And as the sun climbed higher, casting long, unsettling shadows from the edges of their shells, the townsfolk realized they weren't dealing with a simple infestation. They were facing an occupation by a species that had suddenly, inexplicably, developed a level of collective organization that humans only dream of achieving. Seabrook was quiet now, too quiet. The whispering tide had brought a new master to the shore, and the only sound left was the slow, steady click of waiting. If the thought of a tiny, tenacious army bringing civilization to a silent, scratching halt sends a shiver down your spine, then you're exactly where you need to be. Don't let this eerie tale crawl back into the darkness. Hit that subscribe button to enlist in our community. Ring the notification bell to ensure you never miss our next descent into the strange and sublime, and tell us in the comments below. If 5,000 crabs laid siege to your town, what would be the first thing you barricaded? Join the conversation and share this chilling episode with a friend who thinks they've seen it all because, trust us, Seabrook is just the beginning of the quiet invasions we're uncovering.